Authors love a good aesthetic board and creating boards on Pinterest to market their books. But what are the legal ramifications of doing this? Today, we're going to talk to everybody's favorite entertainment and IP lawyer, Tony, to find out more to make sure that you are legally protected while you're marketing your books.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Authors love their visual marketing, and one thing that we do a lot is create aesthetic boards where we are taking imagery of the mood or the vibe of our stories and using it to educate readers on what they will potentially experience inside of our books. But today we're going to talk about the legalities of this to make sure we're doing it the right way and definitely not doing it the wrong way. So, Tony, when it comes to using imagery, I think the first thing we need to touch on is where we're getting access to imagery that we're pulling and creating a collage with. So, what's the right way? What's the wrong way to do that?
Right. So I think first and foremost, your source of your photos are going to be very vital to this discussion. Going on websites like Pexels, or if you have an iStock account or Shutterstock account, and you actually buy stock imagery, those are the kosher way of doing it, because odds are those types of photos operate as royalty-free images. Royalty-free images are a type of license or a type of copyrighted asset out there. If you buy it as a royalty-free asset, the license agreement is such that you can use it in an unlimited manner. You're totally free and clear of any issues there. So I mentioned websites like Pexels. If let's say you're writing a book that's kind of have notes of like floweriness or romanticism, whatever. I'm not an author clearly, but if you were to if that was the theme of your book, typing in Pexels, flowers, girl running through field, maybe like a kiss on like a lipstick stain on a collar, like that. There you go. Like you could find those types of assets on those platforms. It's where it becomes problematic when you're going onto Google Images, and let's say you're grabbing photos from Getty or from AP or other websites where there's a license that isn't royalty free in nature, or where there's a photographer credited that is not granting photo usage as a royalty free license, but rather as a standard photo license agreement where for every use it triggers a license. So that's where you want to be wary of that. Even looking at Creative Commons licenses, I know Creative Commons is a very specific type of copyright license out there. That's also another type of agreement that a license where you could essentially use that type of copyrighted material, but you want to be very mindful of Creative Commons licenses, because a lot of times they come with certain stipulations, and there's like a lot of them. In fact, it's to the point that there's like a kind of like a one-sheet template that Creative Commons has kind of put out that lays out all the symbols and what they mean. So if you see a CC and then a $ with the line through it, that means you have the ability to use that photo or video as long as you credit the photographer or the videographer, but you can't use it for commercial purposes. If you see one with two persons, it may mean one thing. I think it means that you have to give credit to multiple authors or share it with somebody else. There's like a whole legend for Creative Commons. It's like so many parts to it. But so you could get away with using that type of content. But it's where you're just going into Google Images, copying and pasting. That's when it becomes a bit more problematic. And if you are doing that, then asking yourself, okay, if you aren't committing copyright infringement, where's your fair use argument? Where's your criticism? Where's your commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research? Because that's always phase one to the fair use defense argument. And if you are doing it under the guise of fair use and you are satisfying those initial 6 steps, like are you doing it for criticism or are you doing it for commentary? If it's for then any of those reasons, then jumping into your 4-factor test and doing that type of assessment, that's going to help lead you towards maybe in terms of whether or not you got a good fair use argument or not. So if it were me, if I were you, the best thing to do is to opt for the royalty-free imagery first, because it's not going to be a problem before you even touch going on Google Images and just hitting save and then using somebody else's work in that type of manner.
Because of course that can get you in a world of trouble. And we've got lots of videos on this as well, so make sure you're checking those out. But another thing that we want to make sure is very clear is that you are using royalty-free images or you've licensed imagery to use, and you're not misusing things that are out in the public. And that also includes things outside of those specific aesthetic boards where you are creating imagery out of images, pulling together in a collage form. Things like Pinterest allow us to create mood boards for our books. Can we talk a little bit about the legality of that when it comes to creating these, using them to market our books, and even embedding them on our websites?
Yeah. So obviously, when you go onto Pinterest and you search for anything that it floats your boat for these types of mood boards, people are going to have uploaded other types of content. And I think first it's important to understand that on social media platforms, you're agreeing to certain terms and conditions. You're on Pinterest territory, so you have to abide by their guidelines. And sometimes those guidelines include how you can or cannot use somebody else's intellectual property. So sometimes if you're using photos that you found from somebody else's page and you're pinning it on your board, maybe it's the kind of thing where it's no different than doing a retweet or even reposting somebody else's TikTok. But it's when you're posting consistently other people's content that clearly doesn't belong to you that it becomes a problem. And ironically, there's been a swirl of different lawsuits related to this type of activity that have kind of crept up. One of the most notable cases actually dates back to 2007, where the Ninth Circuit out in California ruled in a case called Perfect 10 versus Amazon that people that hosted or entities that host certain third-party content that doesn't belong to them are not infringing copyright because that's all they do. They just show that material. But if they're hosting and showing that material, if they're actually keeping that in their servers, that's when you're blatantly committing copyright infringement. And Perfect 10 versus Amazon dealt with thumbnails of pornographic imagery that Google Images was showing, that those images were actually only available if you had a membership on this pornography website. And so Google asserted, well, our use of the thumbnails qualifies as fair use. And the Ninth Circuit created this whole server test as a culmination, as a result of this whole thing. Now, that was in 2007. Last year, we had now it's 2 years ago, 2021, we had a really, really interesting turn of events where the Second Circuit over here in New York completely said, hey, Ninth Circuit, you don't know what you're talking about. The server test is totally bad law. And they completely dismantled the server test and argued that embedding somebody else's third-party material onto your website or onto your social media or anywhere else, that is enough to satisfy as copyright infringement, because it's no different than just taking somebody else's content without asking for permission. So now we have a law that was on the books for 10 years that, for better or for worse, wasn't the best law, but certainly created some sense of order on the fair use space. Now totally doesn't exist anymore. It's not good law anymore. And the Second Circuit has created new law as a result of it. So now we're in a bit of a conundrum. This is already on top of the fair use doctrine being challenged in the Supreme Court. So why am I mentioning all of this? Well, before Nicklin versus Sinclair, this 2021 decision that came out of the Second Circuit, your use of somebody else's copyrighted material onto your mood boards would not qualify as copyright infringement, because you weren't storing those images on a server. You were just literally taking them from somewhere else and pinning them on the board, and it was just there for viewing. But it's now a different story. In this world, a post Nicklin versus Sinclair, that act is copyright infringement. So the only way you could take somebody else's images and post them on your mood board in that type of manner is if technically you were asked for permission. Now, it still becomes very complicated, because now how does the copyright owner know that their rights are being violated? How are they going to police those efforts? Now this just becomes like the meme where Mr. Krabs is freaking out and it's like all blurry and everything. So it's a nightmare. And I'm going to be honest with you, I feel like we're going to see a challenge of the server test, and likely it's going to be reinstated. If I had it my way, I would like it to be reinstated, or at least redefined into a more succinct definition that's workable. But that said, I think, as you can see, the complexity and the layers of something like this couldn't be more of a red flag. This isn't even like a basic red flag. This is like maroon red, like dark, dark red. So I think this allows me to stress all the more how important it is to just go stick to Pexels or any of these other royalty-free images. Because let me put it to you this way. Do you want to be the subject of the next Nicklin versus Sinclair? Do you want to be brought into a lawsuit that's now going to challenge the server test all over again? Don't do that to yourself. If you got good hair like I do, save yourself the preserve it as much as you can. And once
Yes.
again, we said in a previous episode, this is a situation where you run. You don't walk, just run away from the situation at all costs.
We always want to make sure that we are not getting ourselves involved in potential lawsuits or dragged into court cases that could take forever and ever and ever for something that is as simple as marketing our books. And so, in this particular case, at least for right now, it is a wise choice to make sure that you are not creating these mood boards, that you are not pulling places or from places like Google Images or from Pinterest or wherever where you're not licensing those images properly. So you always want to make sure that you have the licensure to cover that, whether it's a royalty-free image or you're paying a stock image site to gain access to those images when creating any content, from aesthetic boards to mood boards to images that you're putting on slides and videos, etc., to market your books properly. It is better to not have them and not get in trouble than to do something that was going to get you dragged into one of these crazy court cases. If you have further questions on this, drop those down below. And as always, Tony is magnificent at answering questions on his social platforms as well, where he is dropping incredible knowledge on IP and entertainment law. So, Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor.
Hit that subscribe and notification bell for more upcoming episodes from Tony, keeping you legally protected in the publishing space. And if you have questions on the legal side of things, let us know in the comments down below. We're also dropping daily videos to help you level up on your social media and in the publishing world. So if you've got questions outside of the legal space, we want to hear from you on those too, as we're bringing in experts to help make sure that you are more profitable this year in the writing and reading space. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes.